welcome to the second in an experimental Skojek's Creative Thursdays, which is something for Rosh Hashanah, and I wanted to give people a chance to get together to not just listen to things about creation in art, but actually to do some creation in art. It's quite a nice thing to do around Rosh Hashanah, to do creation. And we've had some we've got a great program for Skojek's Creative Thursday. So last week we did singing, which we can't do singing Rosh Hashanah songs in the shul, so we had to do it online. Next week we're baking round challah and round bagels for Rosh Hashanah, and the following week we have Debbie Taylor from Aberdeen showing her lockdown quilt and the mantles that she's embroidered and made for the Aberdeen community. And then we've got an amazing conversation that's never before happened in public, which is Professor Malcolm Lockhead from the Glasgow School of Art talking to Marsha Gladstone, founder of the Yoni Jesner Foundation and mother of Yoni Jesner, who died aged 19 in a bomb in Israel, about the Giffnot Memorial Curtains, the textile project that Malcolm made. So that's going to be a beautiful conversation on the 24th of September. And this one is fabulous as well. It's Randy Klinger talking about and working with us on self-portraits. And Randy, I first met 9 years ago when I first started this job in Findhorn, when I went up all around the country talking to people about the experience of being Jewish in Scotland, and there he was, being Jewish in Findhorn, and also running the Murray Art Centre, and now he's an exhibited portrait artist, and he has been teaching all over the world, Italy particularly, and running art tours and so on. And he's going to do a class with us today. So over to Randy.
Well, thank you very much, Fiona, and also congratulations for you. And you've done such a wonderful job with Skojek and put so much effort and so much life into it. I remember that one time that you came up to Findhorn and there was klezmer music and dancing. And I've never seen anyone sort of put so much energy into their dance. So congratulations to you, and thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you.
So I'm an artist, and I've been making pictures since I was 4 years old. I remember being in kindergarten and children coming up to me saying, make me a picture of this, draw this for me. So I grew up in a family in which my father died when I was young, and my sister's mentally ill, and my mother is mentally ill. So I just made pictures. I was sort of off on my own making pictures. And I've just done that all through my life. Over the past year and a half, I've done 50 self-portraits. And people might look at them and find them very peculiar, but they're getting more and more peculiar. So I really would love to suggest people have a look at them on my website, which is randyklinger.com. What happened to me was, as a brief introduction, was a year and a half ago, I was visiting my aunt and uncle in New York. And I was sleeping on the sofa, and every morning I'd wake up feeling like I'm a bad person, I'm inadequate, I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm old, and the kind of things we all think of. And I just heard this voice in my head, and it just sort of said, stop it. I just said, that's it, enough. From now on, I dedicate the rest of I'm 64 now. I dedicate the rest of my life to learning to love myself. Because I've accomplished a lot in my life, and I feel very inadequate, and there's so much more I've wanted to accomplish. You know, my masters are Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, so there's no way to sort of catch up with people like that, so one could easily feel inadequate. Nevertheless, I woke up that morning and just decided, even if I have to give up everything in my life, I need to dedicate the rest of my life to learning to love myself. And it was a kind of quiet declaration I had made to myself. And then strangely, one day there was someone who was supposed to pose for me, but they weren't there because I was doing pictures of people who were posing for me. Rather than portrait, there were figures. There were people in various situations. And so I just picked up a pencil and started drawing myself. And I hadn't done that for like 40, 45 years. I really abhorred the idea of looking at myself and abhorred the idea of making pictures of myself, even though I had done it when I was in university. And I just started a picture and put it down. And I wasn't really that interested. But then all of a sudden I got really interested, and I just thought, what is it about myself that I think is ugly? And I thought, it's my bald spot. There you go. And it took me 10 years to get used to the fact that I was losing my hair. And this was probably when I was in my 30s. And so I had sort of created a whole long list of reasons that I wasn't good enough. So I set up a mirror, and I wanted to actually see the back of my head. So I used 2 mirrors, set it up in such a way that I could look at the back of myself and really choose views of myself that I would find really discouraging. But instead of making pictures that were also discouraging, I actually found it fascinating, and I started to see pattern in it, like just the hair around my bald spot, for instance. And it was beautiful. It was pattern. It was just lines. And for the last year and a half, I've been doing that. I really recommend you have a look at what I've been doing, because they've become quite complex. But I think it's a fascinating thing to do, is to look at oneself and to really ask oneself the question, who am I? And to sort of separate oneself from one's own inadequacies, and to just find how beautiful we are. I mean, I don't have the kind of body that I wished I had, with shoulders out to here and hips like this and great biceps and pectorals. But my body's beautiful. So I started doing nude self-portraits, which at first were kind of difficult. But then I started to just think, wow, I just can't wait to look at myself. And I think a lot of the reasons that we're taught not to look at ourselves, or that it's a kind of vanity, but it isn't that. It's really just about, this is who we are and this is what we're left with. And it felt like a practical and artistic and a spiritual approach to looking at what we have created with ourselves as a work of art, and what God has created through us, and to look at it and to appreciate God's creation as God has created us. So I'd like to just start by, that's my introduction, to let you speak and just sort of introduce yourselves, and just say if you have any background in drawing or painting, and what you think about making self-portraits, and then we'll get on to it. Oh, and just before that, I just wanted to say that we're going on till 1 o'clock. You can drop out whenever you need to. I know some people have to go. And we'll take a break in the middle, but it's going to be a kind of step process of first, very quickly, learning how to see, to sort of enhance your perception, how to translate that into an accurate drawing, how to move that towards something beautiful rather than just being banal, and then to go into the actual self-portrait drawing that I imagine if you get interested enough, then you can just continue on with that for the next couple of years, like myself. And we can stay in touch about it too, because if you do get excited about it, I'm very happy to stay in touch with students. I've been teaching for the last 28 years, and I think at least 98% of the people who've come to me with the expression, I can't draw. And I've never, ever had a failure. So I have a very simple technique for learning how to see and learning how to draw and to paint. And no one's ever been, no one's ever failed in it. So please, Vivian, would you like to start?
I've just been looking at your website. So I haven't been concentrating 100%. I'm trying to get back onto the main, so I can actually see you probably. Ah, there we are. Yeah, interesting. My background is that thought I was very interested in being an artist as a young teen. I went to a school where we had a whole building devoted to art, and I wanted to study art at art school. But my older cousin, who was nearly 20 years older than myself, had, that's also a long story, but she had defied my father, who was her guardian, and ran off with the art teacher at her art school, and everybody disapproved, and there was major family strife. So for many, many years afterwards, and so I was told, for God's sake, don't do art. You can always do it in your spare time, which one doesn't, of course. So that's the background. She actually married a guy who's quite famous. He became quite famous as an artist in Wales, called Heinz Koppel, a refugee. And he was very fortunately had a share of the Aero Zip company money in Wales. So she didn't starve to death. She only died last year. Anyway, so what can I do? I can show you things. I've just got my sketchbook out. I did a few classes about 10 years ago and dropped it again. Every 10 years or so, I pick up my sketchbook. Something like, this is my style. This is not a portrait. This is the Tour de Mel in France, in Provence, about 15 years ago. This is my son, 15 years ago. BBC4 had a life art class in May. Don't know if you know about that.
Yeah.
Well, they did, and you were supposed to. They built it up. You spent 5 minutes on the first exercise, and then they introduced the next exercise. You spent quarter of an hour on it, and so on and so forth. So I just did a few sketches. That's also my style.
Very lovely.
That's it. That's what I had in my sketchbook.
You have talent.
Thank you.
Britain's got talent.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, they said, what is it now? I've never been very good at maths, but it's an awful long time ago. I thought other people thought I had talent as well, but you can always do it in your spare time was the mantra. So, yeah, and I never did. I got very involved in art history later on in life, as Fiona knows. Yeah.
I'm a designer also, and for 17 years I worked in New York doing film and video design, graphic design. And I was working with this producer once, and she said, "Oh, I really wanted to be a writer, but I just don't have time. I can't do it in my spare time."
I know the excuses. I know
yeah,
the excuses.
But what I said to her, the point was why don't you write 5 minutes a week? Then you actually say, "I'm a writer." And then you might increase it to 10 minutes a week. And then you can say, "I'm a writer." But without that 5 minutes, you couldn't say you were a writer. So it's taking that one little step. But what I always do when I teach is it's based upon the 2 P's, pleasure and patience. And if there isn't pleasure, it's not going to happen. There's never a reason. There has to be a payoff. It has to be almost an erotic experience that you want to do it, you look forward to do it. So the problem isn't that we're lazy. It's more that somehow we need someone to give us the permission to say, really? Can I really do what I want to do? So it's the eroticization of how we see. And when I say
I've been promising myself that for about 5 years now.
I don't mean specifically sexualized. I mean just that you're turned on, that you're awake.
Yeah, I know.
So welcome to the beginning of a new phase of your life.
Yeah, I'm going to be an artist and a writer.
Yeah, see, when you make these declarations to yourself, something happens. I'm telling you, look out. Thank you. Ruth, did you want to speak?
Um, sure. Yeah, I am a student of Randy's, or was before.
All
I
right.
live in the same neck of the woods, and I used to attend his classes, his life drawing classes, quite a long time ago now, before the new art studio was built, and I still miss them. Um, I guess the rest of what to say is that I've had chronic fatigue syndrome (ME) for quite some time,
Mm.
and it's fairly bad. So I don't normally have mornings, but I wanted to do this, so I'm having this morning. And I guess I am a writer, certainly at the 5 minutes a week level, more than that. Um, and I guess I do think of myself as an artist, although quite a lot of weeks it doesn't even get 5 minutes. But I miss doing it. I guess the other thing is that my vision changed a lot um, about the time that the new art studio was built, and I ended up having a weird cataract in one eye, which I now don't have, but it changed my ability to look at something over there and then at the paper with the same set of eyes. And that really put a kink in it. So I'm really looking forward to doing this because I think it may work with my newly settled vision. Um, I'm really looking forward to doing this. I guess the other thing to say is is that I'd like to respond to what Randy was saying about beauty, in that I think I began to love drawing people because I realized that every time I looked at a person to draw them, they became beautiful. It didn't matter what anybody else would think or what I would think if I looked at them without drawing them. People became beautiful when I was looking at them to draw them, and I like that. I, I haven't tried it on myself much lately.
It's a good challenge.
It- yeah, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
What I used to say to my students was when they would be kind of blocked and unsure as to what to do next and losing their motivation, I said, up the level of pleasure. So whenever in doubt, just look for the next thing that increases your pleasure level. So it's about giving yourself permission to do something that our culture basically frowns upon. I see we have a 50-50 American and a British group here. It's kind of interesting, but 100% Jewish. Fiona, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. So I'm a musician rather than an artist, really, if I want to be defined in my art. But made 15, in about 2005, I set off on no, 2004, I set off on a mission to make Hannah Frank a household name, my aunt. So that's her sculpture up there, and there's black and white drawings in my house that are quite familiar to most Scottish people. And her death was announced on BBC Radio Scotland, and Miriam Margolyes came to her 100th birthday exhibition in Glasgow, and I think I did my household name thing, and I've continued with that. When I started doing that project, I found that people to do with galleries spoke in a secret art language, and I went on an art appreciation course to learn that language so I could feel confident in moving in the world of artists. And then I discovered it was just a pretend language, and beyond the it was fine. I was absolutely able to work in that world once I knew the words. It was fine, and I was definitely accepted among all the art collectors as being my aunt's champion. And in fact, so many artists have been in touch with me saying, "Can you do that for me, please?" Well, no, I do it out of love. I don't do it as a job. And 2 years ago, I went travelling for 6 months, and the year before that, I went on a tall ship expedition for 2 weeks, sailing from Oban to Cornwall. And I decided that as I needed to, I'm a bit addicted to the internet, and I needed to fiddle with something with my hands, and there wouldn't be any internet on the boat. So I decided that I would just I'd just draw, which was, it would give me something to do and keep me awake. And I thought I'd better go on some art classes, so that, because I knew people would want to look at what I was drawing, and so I needed to know it was good enough for people to look at. And so did a year of art classes here in Lancaster, where I'm living. And I've just been to have a look at whether I could show you any of my. But when after I came back from travelling, I downsized like mad and threw all my old art things away. So I can't show you anything, but I feel comfortable concentrating on art. I'm really a networker, so this period is bringing artists together, bringing creative people together. So I'm more interested in making things happen for other people than doing it for myself. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just sit aside and not join in. And now I'm thinking, I'm so excited to just spend these hours doing drawing. As a networker, I've done so many different things on the years, so it's great to do this one. And also, I'm really pleased it's a small class and we're recording it. So this is going to be a thing available for everybody forever.
Great, thank you very much. So let's just dive into it then. Did you get the 3-page introduction that I sent you?
Yeah, I just sent it to Ruth at the last minute because you only registered recently.
I don't want to go through it because it would take me 15 minutes to read through it all, but if you have a chance, have a read through it, because it really addresses what is a drawing, and because I talk about lines and shapes.
I'll put it in the chat, Ruth, so you can download it. And I've also emailed it to you.
So the first part of what I wanted to do was to get people to look at drawing in a new way, and just to sort of have an objective eye to looking at nature. And in this case, nature is yourself. So what I'd like to do is the first exercise is to get a mirror and just draw your eye, which sounds very kind of simple, but it's loaded with a lot of baggage. Because, for instance, when one sees a caricature artist in Paris or London, people think, oh, that really looks like the person. But they realize afterwards that it's really just a kind of likeness of the eyes, nose, and mouth set in an oval. But it has nothing to do with actually form, meaning the continuous landscape, topography of a form, in this case, a face. But also, it's very heavily weighted, eyes. People always think that eyes are, they always make them into symbols. They always sort of make it into an and they always turn them into emblems and symbols. So what I would like you to do is, what I'm asking you to do is to simply draw the shapes that make up your eye. And we're just going to do this for 5 or 10 minutes. And it's really just look at your eye, choose one, and just look at it as if you've never seen it before, and just be startled by the kind of shapes of your eyelid, eyebrow, and just study it as if it was a new object that you've never seen before. Don't worry about flattering yourself. Don't worry about whether it looks like you. Don't worry about whether it's pretty. Just be really like a journalist who's been given an assignment, saying, I've got this object that's arrived from Mars. Can you just describe it? So that's what I'm asking you to do with doing a drawing of an eye.
While we're doing it, would you talk about the mirror arrangement so that people who are watching this in the future will know how to set up their studios?
Well, in this case, I'm just working with a single mirror. And if you look through art history, so many artists, maybe starting in the very beginning of the Renaissance, did self-portraiture, or they put a self-portrait within a fresco cycle. The idea of drawing oneself was a kind of new idea, so starting around 1400. But you can almost always tell a self-portrait because it has a self-consciousness to it. It's usually straight on forward or slightly three-quarter, like that, but always with the eyes sort of staring at the directly in front of them, as if they're looking in a mirror. So most self-portraits are very easy to pick up because they have this self-consciousness visually. But what I started doing was working with 2 mirrors. And at one point I was working with 3 mirrors because I couldn't stand that, that icon-like experience of looking straight into a mirror and making a picture of it, because we've all seen that kind of image so many times and it's very limited. So what I started doing was setting up 2 mirrors. Sometimes I would have one on the floor, one up high, and just tilted at each other. And when you arrange the mirrors in such a way that they're looking at each other, you can then look into one mirror and see the reflection of yourself in the other mirror. And when you have it arranged like that, you can look at either mirror and you'll see not just yourself directly reflected, but a secondary reflection of yourself. So in that way, you can see your profile, you can see the back of your head, you can arrange the way you want to see yourself. And it's much more sort of startling and interesting and curious. Mute, mute, mute.
Sorry, I didn't realize we'd been muted.
Why don't we don't, it's only a small group, so why don't we leave our mutes off?
Yeah. How much of the eye, what are you encompassing around the eye? Do we go all the way up to the eyebrows, the whole eyeball, or is it just the eye itself?
So the way I teach is that find the shape that attracts you the most. So you might start with an eyebrow, you might start with a pupil, you might start with an iris, you might start with the skin around the eye, and then just draw adjacent shapes to that. So it's about being fed by pleasure and interest. It's so funny how it's both an American and British thing that people feel very uncomfortable about giving themselves permission to do something they want to do. As you're drawing, I'll tell you a story.
It's the old work ethic.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Things have to be sort of done with pain and suffering in order to feel like we're adequate.
Yeah.
There was a man who was a farmer who was coming to my class, and there was a woman who was posing, and from the position where he was standing, it was just a sort of beautiful, sublime silhouette of this woman. And when he started his picture, he had a large sheet of paper and he made the woman really tiny on the paper and quite like banal looking. And I just looked at him and I said, "Is that what you want to do?" And he said, "Well, I think it's good for me to work in different scales, you know." And so I took a piece of paper and drew this woman's silhouette as large as possible within a sheet of paper, because that's where it was the most dynamic and exciting. And I just held it up to him and said, "Isn't this what you want to do?" And he said, "Well, yes, but," and I said, "No, do what you want to do. Don't prove anything to anyone." People just need the permission to just say, how can I be self-indulgent and selfish? And you know, in Scotland, when I'd use words like pleasure, they don't really go down very well. So it's kind of good being a New Yorker. I can bring that kind of brazenness to rural Scotland.
Yeah, the Protestant work ethic.
Yes, and the same farmer one time was working on a drawing, and he was just making a picture that really looked like something you'd see at a local art fair. And I said to him and to the whole class, I said, "Now, do you want to make a picture that's nice, or do you want to create life? Do you want to create protoplasm?" And they all said, we want to create life. And I said, okay. So I sat with this farmer and I just showed him in the eyebrow of this drawing he was doing of a woman who was posing. And I just kept touching it. And I said, look, it's becoming more and more like life now. It's becoming less of a drawing and more like life. Do you see that? He said, yes, yes. And I said, is that what you want? Because you don't have to want that either, you know? He goes, no, I want to create life. And when I say that, I mean a sense of something more than just a kind of nice drawing, quote unquote.
Mm.
And then he said, why is this so difficult for me? And I said, well, because all your life, everyone told you and reinforced for you that the only way you were a valuable person was to get a lot done quickly. And especially as a man, it's like you could say at the end of the day, you know, you came back from the farm and said, I did this with the pigs, I milked the cows, I got this done, you know. Or if you live in a city, you'd be sort of saying, I earned this amount of money. But art isn't like that. It's about being more sort of fanciful, like a child, like somehow allowing yourself to be in a sort of quasi dream world where you allow yourself to really follow your pleasure. And it's a strange paradox because, and I always say this to students, that the slower you work, the faster you achieve something. I find that if I'm working on a drawing and I speed up because I've got that inside of myself too, that feeling of, oh, I should just get a lot done. I then end up having to erase that because it wasn't done with any beauty, with any consideration. So the slower you work, the more you get done, which is antithetical to our culture. Say cultures, shouldn't I? I've been living here for 28 years, but still feel like I'm quite American.
I've been living here for 35 years, but I'm a Londoner, so I'm a foreigner too.
Where are you?
I'm in Edinburgh.
All right.
That's it. I think I've squashed myself a bit. Never mind. I've done my eye.
Let's see. Okay. Now look again at the space between the bottom of the iris and the bottom eyelid. Is it such a big space?
Yeah, it was when I was looking at it like that. Yeah,
Okay.
it was. I
Okay.
wondered about that myself, but I
Yeah.
suppose it's the angle that I was looking at my
Yeah,
eye.
no, that's fine. Because what I want to do in asking that question is, it's so difficult for people to get beyond the idea of the eye as a symbol or turning it into some kind of emblem. But to look at it as if it's some strange rock that was brought from the moon is difficult for people. But that's what we're going to do with self-portraiture. We're going to look at our faces as if we've never seen them before. And we're just kind of surprised and curious.
Mm.
And it's not about enhancing anything. The enhancement happens kind of like the way Ruth was saying it, is that you look at someone and by studying them, the sort of landscape, the topography of their face, you realize that the shapes are so fascinating and beautiful. I remember I was visiting.
You know what got me most in this tiny little drawing? My eyebrows.
It's
which
fantastic.
obviously need to be dealt with by a professional.
Now, think about that again, because look at what a wonderful eyebrow it is. I mean, it's not an eyebrow. It's
my daughter's always complaining. She said, "Oh, you need to trim it here, and you need to pluck it there, and you need to."
I don't agree.
She won't allow me to be in her presence without having my eyebrows done.
But then you'd look banal, you know. It sort of reminded me of that story about someone being at a party in a city, and they saw this woman in a party in someone's flat, and then everywhere they went, they saw her again. But then they realized it was a lot of different women, but they had all sort of conformed to a certain kind of look and had some kind of cosmetic surgery that made them
Right.
all look the
Yeah.
same. Who
There
wants
are,
to look like an automaton?
there are a lot of women. If you look at the celebrities, if you get, I get streams of stuff on my phone these days, and in between the actual news articles, they talk about all these celebrities one's never heard of. They all look the same. They've all got the hair. Now you look at the wives of the royals in Europe. They're identical. They come out of a single mold of long hair, long dark hair, and they're all going like this all the time.
So don't change your eyebrows. They're very
No, I'm
exciting.
not going to change my eyebrows.
I'm kind of proud of those. I consider them my Gandalf eyebrow hairs.
See, men are meant to be rich and women are meant to be beautiful. And if we don't meet those criteria, we're a total failure, aren't we?
Why can't we have it the other way around?
Yeah, why not? But it's interesting that we're talking about this because it all refers to the subject matter, which is learning to love oneself and making pictures of oneself as if one was an alien that sort of arrived from another planet.
I think I may have finished, well,
Let's see.
done with what I can see that I can see that I can see. I don't
That's
know
great. Great. Because neither of the pictures look like symbolic eyes. It like I can see that your minds haven't overridden
what-
your eyes. And that's what happens is basically the mind always wants to override the eyes and tell the eyes what it thinks it sees. So what we're going for now is drawing what we see as opposed to what we think we see or what our mind tells you, and what our mind does and sort of convolutes things, and it just wants to turn everything into a comprehensible, simple symbol. But we're not going to do that at all. So the relationship between mind, eye, and hand is going to be turned upside down. Because usually what people do when they draw is the eye sees, say it sees a cat. The mind distorts what the eye is seeing and turns it into a symbol. Then the hand records it. So what we're going to be doing is changing that relationship so that the eye takes in the information and gives that information directly to the hand, with the mind just going off and going sort of semi-asleep. It's just not needed. It reminds me of when children draw up to the age of 7. Watch a child draw, they just stare at their paper and draw a cat, an elephant, whatever it is. They never look up because what they're doing is they have an idea, a picture in their head, a symbol that the mind is just repeating to the hand to say, well, a cat looks like this. You make a circle here and pointy triangle ears there, but that has nothing to do with the eyes. The eyes are the passive audience, observer. So what we're doing is we're flipping that and making the mind the observer and the audience, passive. Fiona, where's your picture?
He's gone away.
Oh, Fiona, well,
Nope, she's here.
where's your
You
eye?
need to unmute.
My picture's just going to sit on my table here.
Okay, good. Okay, so what we're going to do next is to set up with your mirror. Do you want to work with more than one mirror, or do you just want to work with one mirror?
I
I'm
think
not sure I got room for more than one mirror. I've got one big mirror which you can see, and then I've got a titchy witchy one. So I don't know whether that's going to work.
Look at what I've set up here. I just have 2 titchy witchies. Do you see them?
Yeah. I got another small one somewhere.
It doesn't matter. You don't need to have a big mirror. You can have tiny mirrors. It's
Yeah,
just
I'm
what you're looking at.
thinking, where have I got another small mirror?
No, the one that you had was perfect.
Oh, okay.
Just arrange
Right.
it so that when you look into the mirror, it's reflecting the image of yourself from the other mirror.
Ah,
So what you'll end up with is two mirrors, each one having an image of the other mirror with yourself reflected in it.
that is not working for me yet.
You have to just keep moving it around. You'll see it's basically, they need to be about 45 degrees from each other. Is that right? No, 90 degrees from each other. Just keep sort of tilting them a bit. So the reason is that it's just kind of sickening to look at oneself in the mirror in the same way that we always look at ourselves in the mirror. This way you can draw your profile, or you can draw the back of your head, or you can really allow yourself to find an image that excites you and interests you. Because
oh my God.
there you go. I knew it was a spiritual group.
Who is that person over there?
Check her out.
Oh my God. It's like looking at a photo. You think, oh, that's not me.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah. I wish I had the same
Wait
size.
till you get to the part of taking off all your clothes.
No, I don't think so. 40 years, 30 years ago, maybe, but no, yeah.
And I really sort of given up on my body, but now I think I'm really cool looking.
Yeah, well, you need stronger glasses.
I think it's easier to do it now because nobody's expecting perfection at 65.
Uh-huh.
Give it another 10 years, then you know there's no such thing as perfection.
But then you realize that there's a whole other way of looking at beauty that's really apart from prettiness.
Mm.
So there's a theme in this beyond just, I'm making a picture. It's actually asking a philosophical question.
I think I'm going to do it the other way around then, maybe. Because the picture I'm getting over there, which is the interesting one, is very small. If I use a larger mirror.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's small. You know, what I started doing was,
it does matter to me because I can't see it.
I put.
I want to be able to see what I'm doing.
I put one way up high so I could have an image where I was looking from above at myself. It's just that we need stimulation, and by just looking directly into a single mirror, it's a bit tedious. It's limited. So now I want to sort of remind you what we were doing in this first exercise of looking at your eye as if you'd never seen it before is an important approach to drawing. It's really looking at shapes. It's not making lines that are just going nowhere. They're shapes that are interlocking with each other. They're building something. So in doing that, we're creating form. And when I say form, I mean three-dimensional volume, illusionistic volume. By locking together those shapes, as opposed to just lines that are maybe expressive in themselves, shapes are quite different. If you get a chance to go back to read the 3-page introduction that I sent, I really go on to explain the difference between a line and a shape, or lines that are being used to create shapes. It's a very different mindset. It's almost like using a different part of your mind because it's a construction as opposed to two-dimensional design. It might sound vague, but it's a significant thing. Because as a teacher and as an artist, I could see that when people draw and they use their intention to make a shape, it's a very different kind of thing from making a line. And the authenticity of the line, the sort of quality and the characteristics of the line change. When it's a studied line, a line being used for a utilitarian purpose is very different from a line that is a kind of throwaway, expressive notion. So we're actually covering a lot of things in this morning, but you don't really need to notice that. You might go back and read the introduction again later and you'll see what we actually have been going through. So in making any picture, the preparation for making a picture is equally as important as making the picture itself. So don't hurry through that. So if you take time to set up, in this case, 2 mirrors so that you can find the view of yourself that at this moment is the most enticing, the most erotic, the most engaging, that's incredibly important, and it's equally as important as making the drawing itself. Because a lot of people won't give themselves the time that it takes, the permission to give themselves that time, but it's equally as important as making the picture itself. I had a teacher in university who said that even stretching the canvas and priming the canvas is part of the creative part of making a painting. Because our minds are so self-critical, it's really important that we learn a whole other way of approaching these things and to be able to overcome self-criticism and a feeling of, oh, well, it's not going to be good anyway, or it's about giving ourselves permission to attempt the thing we really want to attempt. So use anything that you need to rig things up to give yourself the view that's the most enticing.
Got it. I put the little mirror on a couple of books, and that's higher
There
now.
you go. Soon you're going to be hanging from chandeliers.
So now I have a profile view.
Yeah. Now ask yourself, could that be more exciting? Slightly tilted this way, tilted that way. How do you want to have your head, you know? And just draw the part of your face or your body that you see that you find the most exciting. I even make it more challenging by saying, take the part of yourself you think is most ugly and draw that.
Oh, I know that one. It's so difficult to do with a pencil. Because
There's something about the
there's a
act.
line there, there's a line there. Oh, it's here, and
But think of the achievement of turning that which we think is banal or ugly into that which is beautiful. That's the job of an artist.
yeah, it's stuff I didn't have. It's part of me that I didn't have 20 years ago. It's new to me.
Yeah, well, I hated myself for 10 years for having a bald spot. Hated. But now I like to make pictures of it. It's enticing. It's erotic.
Right. So I have to make pictures, a picture of my double and treble chins.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, the way to do it is to start by seeing the first shape that engages you. I call it Velcro. Let your eyes scan across the field of the subject, which in this case is yourself. Scan across the field and just notice where your attention stops. That means that's what interests you. Now, don't get caught up with the idea of it being self-portraiture. So where your face meets the background is equally, is equally as important and interesting. You might want to draw some shapes of your face and some shapes adjacent to that of the background. So you have the permission to really play. You might want to dip in and out of face, background, and sometimes by drawing the background, you're creating the silhouette of the face. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is to get you to have the permission to be really playful. Because the more pleasure you experience in making a picture, the more pleasure it's going to bring the viewer. People don't realize that. They think, oh no, I have to really suffer and struggle. But then people who view the picture will pick up that suffering and struggling, and there won't be any inspiration. Inspiration comes from pleasure, a childlike, playful pleasure. Watch children as they play. They'll be sitting in a sand pit or playing under a tree, and they'll make up some game that I'm the king and you're the queen and I'm a farmer, whatever it is that they're doing. And I remember how I used to play like that. But as soon as the game gets boring, they stop and they make up another game. So in the same way as an artist, keep changing the play, keep changing the game. So if you start by drawing your chin, for instance, and you find that fascinating, and then you happen to notice that where your chin meets your elbow or your shirt or your shoulder is more enticing, go in that direction. So constantly play the game that you like, but as soon as you notice you're feeling bored or agitated, change the game. And this is for the sake of beauty. This is for the sake of excellence in art. In order to get to more excellence, you need to be able to be very aware of your own boredom. And what people mostly do is that they feel bored, they pretend they're not bored, and they just sort of work their way on through it. No, that is not the way to do it. The way is to notice where your interest is going and follow your interest. It's almost like electricity. Where there's kind of a buzz, that's where you should be with your attention. So for instance, when I'm working on a drawing, I'll be all over the place. I'll be working on some area and then I'll think, oh, this is getting a little tedious. And then I'll go to another part, say, oh, this excites me. So I go there. Excuse me. So always follow your interest. Never let yourself get bored, because what will happen is your eyelids start to get heavy and you kind of think, oh, I want to go have a tea and a cookie. Biscuit, excuse me.
Cookies fine.
Okay. You speak both languages.
I do.
Bilingual.
I had a girlfriend. I had an American girlfriend once, and we were going to do a mid-Atlantic dictionary.
Uh-huh.
I'm lost. I'm completely lost now. This doesn't resemble anything at all.
It will.
Oh, it is not resembling anything at all.
Just draw the one shape, and in the same way you were drawing your eye, look at the portrait of that, as it were, the portrait of that shape. Make sure that the shape in its scale from height to width is the way you actually see it. And if it isn't, get out your rubber and alter it. That's the only reason that things could not look like the way they are. Another reason is that you're looking at an aspect of yourself that you've never seen before. And
You're
you're
looking at it in isolation.
yes,
You
but
can't
also
see how it joins up with anything else.
what most people do is they draw an outline of a face and then fill in bits.
Yeah.
That's very tedious because it's like reading the last page of a murder mystery. You don't want to know who did it.
Look at that on the,
Don't,
on the other side. There.
yeah.
That's my neck.
Just in the same way you're drawing your eyebrow, draw your neck.
Oh my God.
And at any moment, if you feel like you don't like something that you're drawing, switch to another part, switch to something else.
Yeah, I don't like this.
So switch it, start again, do something different. But take another piece of paper. Don't draw on the same piece of paper.
Oh no, I haven't got too much paper. Sorry. I have to do more things on one page. Being a rebel. I'd have to go out and buy another sketchbook. I know it's a big investment, but I don't have time. I know what's wrong with this neck. It's because it would have to, I wouldn't be able to move my neck to get it right. And every time I switch just a fraction, The whole aspect changes.
Yeah, but you're being self-critical now. That's what's actually happening. So again, look at yourself as if you're a rock that's arrived from the moon, and just look at yourself with curiosity, no judgment, and no kind of trying to make sense of anything. It's really using a different part of your nervous system to do this. And it brings about a more beautiful line, a more authentic expression.
I'll start. I think I'll drop the neck.
Drop the neck.
Drop the neck.
Well,
Well, it was going to be exciting because it's, you know, it's a new part of me, but
follow your excitement.
it's too volatile.
Okay, well,
I
choose
can't
something.
keep it still enough to draw properly.
Okay, do something else then.
Yeah, I think I'll do my nose.
While you're working, I thought I would just read. I'm having a series of exhibitions of my self-portraits. One at the Accademia di Belle Arti in Florence, of
Nice.
self-portraits. That's right next door to where Michelangelo's David is. Then I'm having another one in Florence called Galleria Cestello. And then in The Hague called Pulchry Studio, which is around the corner from the castle. Then I'm having one at Eden Court in Inverness. And and then I'm in the Scottish Portrait Awards, and that's going to be in Edinburgh first, then in Glasgow, and then in Banff. So I've written a premise to the exhibition, and I thought it might be interesting to read it to you for those who haven't read it. And then that way it'll get as incorporated as part of the recording. So I'm going to do that now. So it says, self-portraits, know yourself. How do we look at and thereby finally accept ourselves as we enter the fourth quarter of our lives? We are all beautiful. We can all reveal aspects of our beauty, but how many of us would freely say so? My intention with these drawings is to find adventure, curiosity, attraction, and beauty in myself as my own muse, and to share this inspiration with others that they might also see themselves through this newly restored mirror. The obvious destination of our journey is self. The circle begins as a holy, trusting baby. Then we set out on our way as seemingly immortal young beings. We create profession, family, friendships, always looking outwards, learning how to both belong and individuate, a concretization of our ego. Yet in the final quarter, we can complete the circle, arriving again home, releasing the bondage of the self that we have created to facilitate our survival. We now face a certain final life period with joy, surprise, or regrets. Yet the body's changes make it all so clear. We are more than our accomplishments, more than our accumulation, more than the fashioned self that we have shown the world to improve our chances of survival in a competitive, chaotic world, and to compensate for all our known and unknown inadequacies, all falling away like the sullied golden jewels found beside a body in some ancient tomb. Who am I? In my absolute truth, beyond all my personality and constructions, an artist, a father, a benevolent saint, a greedy scoundrel. Seemingly all have pondered on this. To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom, Socrates and Aristotle. To own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world, Ramana Maharshi. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Carl Jung. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are, E. E. Cummings. In my drawings, I approach myself in every angle dressed or nude, in hard or soft focus. In all that I loathed about my appearance, I now find fascinating patterns, exotic visual associations, even erotic metaphors. Last year, I made a promise to myself, before I die, I will accept all that I am. But who am I? These drawings may be the entrance to a discussion so that we may teach each other that answer. As the lifelong crafted icon of self slips away, perhaps the discovered self-portrait of magnificence is revealed. After all, what could be, in our own very individualized and anchorless time, the greatest subject for the artist, the writer, the performer? When I asked my mentor, the great art historian Ernst Gombrich, this question, he referred surprisingly to the self-referential, the self. In 2D visual arts, beyond images, narratives, metaphors, and symbols, what else is there besides the line? The line, the shape, tone, and chroma. There is nothing else. When I was regularly teaching, I would ask my students to see the strong difference between shape and line. A line has a kind of autonomy. It asks the viewer to look at itself like the star of a play or film. A shape is made equally of a line or a series of lines, but those lines feel more like support players, lesser characters. Yet the qualities of the lines that build up a shape are very different from single autonomous lines. Because they are helpers that we create in order to describe a shape, a different intent goes into them. They're less flamboyant. Whether they are hard and wiry like a Cézanne or Matisse, or sinuous and sensuous like a Bellini or some Baroque arts. Because of this, lines that make up shapes can often be less self-conscious and thereby be more innovative, tapping the internal, latent, less self-conscious intelligence of the artist, often making them more authentic and or forward-thinking. I don't mean to say that one is better than another, just to develop an eye and intelligence to see and appreciate the difference and the benefit that can offer. This is about expanding the vocabulary of lines and the expanded spectrum of emotional charge at the artist's disposal. There's a strange knowingness as an artist where you can be working on a drawing or a painting and you just know when something is right, fulfilling, good, beautiful, even if it's not pretty. Ever since when I was like in my late 20s and 30s, I remember I would always like hear this voice when I was drawing and painting. This constant, consistent yes, no. So I'd be working on a painting and I would just hear yes, 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 no. And then I would take it out.
Can you let me into how you get that voice arranged?
For me, it's always been a body experience. You know, when I was 7 years old, I had this experience that I call an aesthetic orgasm. I was living in suburbia in New York, and for some reason on a Saturday morning, God forbid it was on Shabbos, I was doing the gardening, and my family was away. And one of my tasks was to do the garden, to cut the grass and to edge the grass. And I was a very, very good boy. I never, ever said, why do I have to do that? I just always did whatever I was told. So I'd finished my gardening, and when I finished, I went inside and just turned on the telly. And what happened to be on was a performance of Appalachian Spring by Martha Graham.
Ah.
And I was just lying on my belly with my head in my hands, looking up at the television. And it was this dance, a modern dance from, I think, 1940s, early 50s.
Sounds right.
And I just got this sort of wham experience of like a feeling from my feet up to my head of just a kind of pleasure, of just a kind of experience of awe that could have led me to tears or to to joy. It was something like right in the middle that encompassed both. And that really set me up for the rest of my life, that I realized that beauty and that kind of knowingness, that yes and no, was something that really was a body experience, something from my belly, really. So I would always say, trust your body. Your body sort of knows, like, whether you feel good or feel bad, and what you're drawing feels good, and you just keep adding to that experience of good feeling, or if it feels grisly and yucky. Like I remember this one time, this man, I live at Findhorn, there was a man who was a student of mine for a while, but he wanted to do a drawing of me. So he did a drawing of me, and then he showed it to me. And I said, no, not that Randy. I don't want to see that Randy. It was the Randy of suburban Long Island, of like middle-aged, middle class, middle. And I said, no, that's not me, no. Because we can make ourselves look mediocre and boring and banal, or we can make ourselves look like amazing queens and kings. It's just that he just didn't know how to sort of embellish and to sort of follow his good thoughts, his better thoughts, and just sort of was left in the world of banality. I remember I was doing some work with the Earl of Murray, and I said, oh, I'd like to do a drawing of you. And he said, he misunderstood me, and he said, oh yes, I should have an official portrait. And I said, no, I don't mean that. But then I said to him, I said, I won't make you pretty, but I'll make you beautiful.
Did you do it?
No, he was too busy. But I think there's a real big difference between prettiness and beauty, and I think it's so important.
I've worked with him too through the museum. I think.
What were you doing with him?
He's the patron of the Falconer Museum.
Oh, right. Amazing. He was in my dream last night. Really weird. I was working with him for over a year because he asked me to build an art center for him. It's very weird. You know, I built this art center 14 years ago at Findhorn, and about 8 years ago, 4 different groups came to me and asked me to build art centers for them. And I said yes to all of them because that's how I decide things. I just have a body feeling of yes or no. But none of them ever came to pass, which is strange. I raised £1 million to build the art center here, but I realized I had become hostage to it. So I had to look for that key that was going to open the ball and chain around my leg.
You found it.
Now I draw from morning till night, 7 days a week.
Wow. I was just going to say about drawing, when I was about 15, my Aunt Hannah said she wanted, no, maybe 12, my Aunt Hannah said she wanted to sculpt me. And I just thought that would be so boring, why would I want that? And years later I said, I'm ready now to be sculpted. And she said, oh no, that was ages ago I wanted to do that. And it would have been so amazing to have that now, you know, who knew? Like your Earl, who wanted an official portrait but didn't have time. Just make them have time. I think mostly portraits would be girl with laptop, girl looking at phone these days, and then people could just get on with their life.
The only drawings I've ever done of my daughter where she would sit still was when she was staring at her laptop. So I would sit from another perspective to see her sort of 3/4, but always with this eerie white light on her face. I spoke to someone who had a near-death experience, and he was shown the future when he was in this other dimension. And he said, in the future, there's going to be no technology whatsoever, and we're all going to live in small communities that are themed and dedicated to different arts.
Wow.
Great, isn't it?
Wishful thinking.
What, you mean no Zoom?
Wishful thinking. Where would we be without Zoom right now?
I think I need to show you what I'm at now and show it to
Yeah, where you at?
I'm having this break you promised us.
Good.
I think we all need a bit of a screen break as well.
Shall we?
Let's see Ruth's thing and then have a little bit of a screen.
Yeah, I want Randy's view of this, where it's
Where's that?
stuck.
Ooh, I love that.
I think I decided to try the chin challenge.
Wow,
I'm
really good.
not sure how
Now, what I would recommend,
parts.
what I would recommend is slow down.
Okay.
So look again at certain areas you've done and see whether you haven't cleaned your plate, as it were. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure.
Try to get as much out of what you're looking at as possible. Like, for instance, I remember when in the class that I used to teach, someone was saying, oh, it's so difficult to draw hands. Oh, it's so difficult to draw fingers. Isn't it the most difficult thing in the world to draw fingers and hands and feet? And I said, no. The most difficult thing in the world to draw is something you don't like. But I could very happily spend an hour or 2 hours just drawing one digit on one finger.
Yeah.
That's just reporting on oneself. But instead to turn oneself into a muse, turn oneself into a subject matter. It's objectification of self, which allows you to look at yourself with more curiosity.
Yeah.
It made me think of this this song by Frank Zappa that I heard when I was a teenager. What's the ugliest part of your body? What's the ugliest part of your body? Some say your nose, some say your toes, but I think it's your mind, your mind.
Right.
When I was a teenager.
Who here listened to Frank Zappa?
Oh yeah.
No, sorry.
Wrong country.
Wrong country.
Or I exposed myself to that.
I just thought that was so funny. No, what I try to do when I'm teaching is to get people to become unself-conscious, to become unaware of themselves and just get really involved with their eyes, their perception, and giving that information to their hands. And sometimes when I do longer courses, there was a course I used to do that was a 12-week course. I really wanted people to get their minds to shut up. So I would do anything that it took to get them to do that. I just do all kinds of silly things. And at one time I had an international group and I asked each person to sing their national anthem while we were working to get people's minds off of their drawing. The wildest ones were the Finnish and Japanese.
Oh.
We all stopped and stared with astonishment for the Japanese anthem.
Our related languages. I remember a sort of stream of consciousness conversation in your old classes.
It's really good, but it's almost like a bicycle. When you're in the right gear, you go into this kind of stream of consciousness. Mm. It's very helpful being an artist because then you start to forget all the things that you're supposed to be worried about.
Or that you don't like about your body.
I feel like what we're going through now with the pandemic and Trump and Boris and protests and violence and that we need something to sort of divert our attention. And I do that every once in a while. I have to sort of think of something really beautiful. Like when I draw, I listen to lectures. I've been studying art history for the past, I don't know, 30, 40 years. But I listen to lectures endlessly on art history, especially Italian and Flemish Renaissance and some Baroque, Dutch Baroque. But also I've taken courses. There are these courses you can get for free. I'm doing one now with Yale University on the fall of Rome and early Middle Ages. It's just fantastic, the things we can do during this lockdown. Well, it's not really a lockdown anymore. But there are all these lectures and whole courses that you can get. And I need that kind of diversion when I'm drawing. I want my mind to go somewhere else. And I do actually remember what I'm hearing. It sort of enters through osmosis.
Well, I thought, who the hell is that?
Now, what I would do is if you could draw the same thing, but draw it slower and more pleasure for each area, and draw. See, what you've done there is you've switched from what you did with the eye. With the eye, you were drawing shapes. There, you're drawing lines. There's a big difference. Do you see that?
Yeah, but you were talking about lines anyway. So then I went on.
Yeah, but it's a different conceptual approach, because that means you're sort of self-conscious about drawing something to look like yourself, to look like the subject. What you're doing with the chin is actually closer. It's really just drawing the shapes.
Yeah.
Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
Well, one looks kind of, the profile looks kind of anecdotal. It looks like you want to make a picture of yourself, whereas the chin, it's like you're off on a kind of mystery tour, and that's much more exciting.
Okay. Then I decided to do the head.
Yeah, the chin is actually quite beautiful. Do you not see that?
No.
If I was going to buy one of your drawings, I would buy the eye one and the chin one, but I wouldn't buy the other one because it's flat. Whereas look at the chin. I feel like I could touch it and feel it. It's very tactile. It's very sculptural. That's what happens when you draw shapes. All of a sudden you start to work with volume.
Okay.
I feel like with the chin, I could touch that and it would feel nice. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And same thing with the eye. Even though the way you filled it in is it's a different mentality. There's a real shift in mentality between the eye and the chin and the profile. The profile stands out as being quite different, quite illustrative in comparison.
Yeah, I was having real difficulty with it because it seemed to me to be so far away, and also, to get everything to relate to everything else. Whereas with the chin, it didn't really matter.
Go back to the one of your eye and continue with it. Just spread from it. Just go on to the other eye and some of the hair. That one really shows a lot of promise to it, as well as the chin one. Do you understand?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Because I hated it. I hated the profile, and I hated the next one as well when I was trying to do the way you said do the hair.
There's a shift in approach and consciousness in the profile.
Okay.
So I'm not looking at it as I like this, I don't like this. I'm saying one is anecdotal, if you know what I mean, and one is form.
Well, I can give you the answer to why the first two are better, and or whatever you want to call it. That you, I don't know, better or not better, but that they're more genuine. It's because I guess I don't have a very long attention span.
Right. So that's very important. So remember what I said, if you feel bored or not really engaged, don't go with that direction. Go when it becomes like a mystery, like you pretend you're reading a mystery novel and you're starting to get engaged in it and you want to find out more. It's about building engagement and curiosity. Whereas the profile, it was just kind of like, well, I know this. And it's sort of done because you know it. But the other ones are different because it's a different consciousness in approaching it, and because they are depicting, creating the experience of three-dimensionality, sculptural, illusionistic volume. That's a big shift between what the profile is, which is just describing a profile, but it has no sense of three-dimensional volume. If you look at, and I recommend it, you can go online to the British Museum and look at Michelangelo's drawings. Every single line and shape he makes is two-dimensionally, graphically interesting and describing three dimensions. So everything you do in the eye and the chin are two-dimensionally, graphically interesting and creating sculptural volume. And that's so much more exciting. You know, when I first met Gombrich, he lived off of Finchley Road.
I know. I've got his book. I've got his book.
Yeah, the first thing he said to me was, your colors are very expressive, but you don't understand form at all. And I was like, wow. And now that's what I teach, is really helping people to understand form. Because when there's something about the human eye and mind, when you see something that pops off the page that becomes like three dimensions, there's a kind of satisfaction that happens, and we don't really even understand why that is, you know, perceptually or psychologically.
Could it be that the profile is not three-dimensional, it's two-dimensional?
Well, you're reading it two-dimensionally, but
Yeah.
more about your intent. Your intent was just to describe something as you know it is.
Okay.
It's like sort of the feeling of paging ahead in a murder mystery to find out who did it, and then you're bored. Do you know what I mean? It has to be a slow unfolding, unraveling of a story that engages you completely. And that's happening in the eye and the and the chin. So just continue with those. Erase the profile and go back to those. Choose one of them and continue with it.
I think I would be, yeah, that's looking face on. I think I would be better getting other people to sit for me rather than me looking at myself all the time, because I'm bored with myself.
It's really important that you notice the difference between the profile and the other two, because if you see that, can be applied to anything that you want to draw.
Yeah.
But the eye one is really good. Why not just sort of expand and put in the other eye and nose?
Okay.
Or just go in the direction towards the next thing that you're looking at that engages you.
Okay.
Engagement is so important, because if you don't care about something, it can't be well drawn.
No.
That's why I use the word erotic, because mostly people get excited about the erotic, you know. So, and that's why I use the expression aesthetic orgasm also, because it's like turning on this part of ourselves that is highly engaged, as opposed to just thinking, you know, like I'm at work, you know, and like I'm a hairdresser as well. That's how I earn my living. And I look at someone's head and I think, oh, this is what I want to create for them. And I suggest something.
You were a hairdresser?
Yeah. But I'm always thinking, how can I make this person look more beautiful? So I don't just sort of say, oh, that's a pixie haircut, I'm just going to give that to you. I think, how could I make this person, how could I sculpt this person's profile and silhouette to make them more beautiful? So it's about, in everything you do is an engagement. You know, when I was 16, I worked at the till in the department store. I wasn't that engaged, you know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put.
But I think the challenges that you're facing are actually really important. They're not to be dismissed at all. Do you understand?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to put the second mirror away for the moment.
Good.
That's when it started going wrong for me. And just do have the big mirror close up. Because I also have, well, you wear glasses as well. Most of us do at our age. I have difficulty in seeing past the glasses as well when I'm drawing. I'd like to do a drawing without the glasses, but that's difficult. So,
well, I started using some photographs as well, because
all right.
There was one drawing I got to, it was, I think, maybe my 7th self-portrait, where I wanted to do a self-portrait of myself asleep. And I realized I can't do that. So I just held out a camera and photographed just my eyes closed for that part. And then I realized, oh, you can really sort of expand much more by mixing photography and mirrors.
Okay.
So just whatever it takes that engages you. So if something that I say, for instance, as a suggestion doesn't take, just throw it aside and focus on something else. There's no prescription for this. It's just about, see, what you're going through is a kind of staged asking yourself a question of, what am I doing? Why would I do it? You know, for me, it's a very big question. Why does an artist do what they do?
Mm.
You know, if you wake up in the morning and you're not excited, saying, I'm so excited about the thing I'm working on, like with my self-portraits, if you look at them, they get more and more challenging. And I always have to up my level of challenge. Like the one I'm working on now is myself nude in the garden with the light, the strong sunlight coming through potato plants, casting leaf patterns all over my body.
Wow.
It's really challenging, you know, but I need that. So whatever it is that gives you that sense of excitement and wanting to engage.
So you're taking a photo, or a selfie of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. I can't prescribe for someone else what is going to excite them. But what's happening for you is you now have this question planted, which is, what would be my reason to do this? There always has to be a payoff in life for anything, you know? And I think it's really important to confront it and say, is there a payoff here? No, I'm not going to do it, you know? And because then you shed the things that are just a waste of your time. But then when you see where there is a payoff, you can really invest your time into it.
That's for me.
Well, so the way I see the world is a continuous pattern. So when I look at you and your little boxes here, I see a woman, but I also see a map. I also see a framed picture. It's almost like there's a total continuum because it's a picture, you know, and if you took a piece of plastic and with a magic marker, you could outline all these different things of the ceiling, the person, the framed pictures, and it's a continuum. So it's not, that's one way of looking. And another way of looking would be to say there's a sculptural object, a person in an empty void in a room, and the room has boundaries to it. It seems to me there's at least two ways of perceiving. One is like a continuous curtain. And I think what I'm doing now in my pictures is more to do with this idea of a continuous curtain of forms as opposed to a sculpture sitting in an empty room.
There is a lot of satisfaction to be derived from seeing the continuous forms. It's pleasing.
Well, I think it's very interesting because some things we're conscious about and other things we're unconscious about and other things are just percolating up. And that's why I like to work this way and to teach this way, which is what I find the most satisfying is to allow a participant, a student, to allow their philosophical, perceptual approach to life to percolate upwards without them being consciously aware of it. Because if you're conscious, if you're self-conscious, then you're making an illustration and you're illustrating an idea. If you just allow these things to bubble up, like in the picture that I just showed you, because I didn't have any conscious ideas about it. I just thought, I like that. You know, it's very like a stupid child. I like that. I want to make a picture of it. But within that, it's allowing a kind of percolation, a bubbling up of what my philosophical approach to life is now, how I perceive life, how I perceive myself. And I think that's much more rich and authentic as opposed to saying, oh, I want now to illustrate this idea of, I see life as a pattern, so I'm going to use a pattern for that. I would find that really boring. See, I want to sort of do psychoanalysis on myself by just making pictures and follow my interest. And then by following my interest, I can say, oh, that's who I am now. But illustration is a very different thing, and that's not what I'm leading you to here today, this morning. There's a departing of the ways between art and illustration. Illustration is a preconceived notion, an idea that you then want to depict. Art is something different. It's something that allows for the totality of yourself, everything about yourself, to bubble up and appear as an image. And if we put our attention to objectivity, like being a journalist, and if we put our attention to being excited about form, those are two distractions that keep us away from a kind of obvious self-examination or a self-conscious examination, which then leads to illustration. And illustration has its uses, but I'm not interested in illustration as an art form. Art is always the unknown. It's starting with a big question mark and ending with a question mark. Whereas illustration is, I know I need to show this woman in this room, and the feeling should be one of sadness or one of joy, and I'm going to depict that. Whereas art, you're entering into something that's a question mark. So for instance, the drawing I'm doing now with the potato plant, my face is really quite serene, but it's coming out quite naughty looking. And I can't force it to be otherwise. There's something that wants to be expressed, that will be expressed, if you allow it to be expressed, without giving any judgment towards it. One thing I always tell my students is never repair pictures. Never push them in a direction that they somehow don't want to go. Sort of become a friend with the whole aesthetic and emotional climate and let it fulfill itself. Not as a kind of therapy, but as an art. You know, if you think back of the classical Greek tragedies, the sort of, if you go through history and think of certain things that have just been touching upon a deep experience of the human experience, of real poignancy, how does one get to that? And I would say that the way you get to it is by allowing the completeness of yourself to be depicted in an unself-conscious way. I think we live in a particular time in which it's hard for us to find themes. You know, when I went to see Gombrich the first time, my first question for him was, what are the great themes of our time? As an artist, I don't want to waste my time. I want to be involved with the greatest theme of our time. And I talked about Chinese and Soviet social realism. And I said, it can't really be that, because that's a real theme. And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, Morandi? And Morandi was an Italian artist, painter, and etching designer in the 1940s and 50s, who just made pictures of bottles and vases. And as they got more and more dusty, he didn't dust them off, and he just kept making paintings of different arrangements of bottles and vases. And I thought what Gombrich must have meant was, now the great theme is self-referential, the self-portrait. Because in a way, that's what Morandi was doing. He didn't make pictures of himself, but it was almost like he was using the still life as a self-portrait. And I think it's very exciting to think in the visual arts, what is a necessary and beautiful and important theme, a relevant theme in our time? Because we get all kinds of junk, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just,
All kinds.
but what's really relevant? I really want to create the next golden age. I want to spur that on, you know, and in building the art center here, my very sort of conscious attempt was that I wanted to create the place that would be the birthplace of the next Athens and the next Florence. Because I grew up in New York, and I would go to the Museum of Modern Art and look at all these paintings that were beautifully lit with golden frames, and just thinking, what is this? It didn't match my childhood experience of the aesthetic orgasm.
Oh,
Martha Graham.
oh, dearie me.
Does anything match that? I have a friend who's also who has spent his entire life trying to recreate his grandmother's cheesecake experience. Never done it. It reminds me of the same thing. Have you ever had that same art experience as when you were 7?
I just think it's very important as a culture, and what we're going through right now, to really ask the question, is it okay to have a bunch of bricks on the floor that are reselling for 100 million? Is it really okay? Is that feeding our culture at all? And I just think it's so incredibly important to be asking the question, to feel like we're not, as a culture, aiming at the very highest. And I would switch my subject matter in my pictures immediately if I could think of a theme that was more poignant, more relevant, and more beautiful. But I can't. I've thought of so much, you know, I can't think of anything that's more relevant than the self, and to sort of deal with inadequacy.
Andy, excuse me interrupting.
Fine.
Now you're bringing financial value into the whole thing, and
Well,
and the whole basis of the value of so-called modern art, the pile of bricks you're talking about. I don't think it's relevant. I think it's a construct of people who have far too much money, nothing to do with it, and the auction houses.
I agree with you completely. It's only about investment.
It's investment.
But, you know,
These things are never seen in public.
Oh, I know.
They're never valued. They're never rated.
I know. But somehow the only thing that the Guardian and the BBC will pay attention to is, like, for instance, you hear about a work of art, like they discovered this potentially last painting by Leonardo da Vinci, the one of Salvatore Mundi. And
Yes.
I even question whether it's by Leonardo, but the only reason that the media was paying attention to it was for the sale value. You know?
Yes. Yes.
I agree with you
yes.
completely. That's my point exactly. You know, just before I left New York, I was at a party, and there were art gallery people there, and I took them aside and I said, "Explain to me how this all works." And they said, "Oh, it's very simple. It's an unregulated stock market."
Yeah.
And
yeah. I mean, I think it all started with, I hate to say this, but I do think it started in the United States.
Oh, it did, yeah.
I think it started with Jackson Pollock,
Yeah.
who was a very accomplished artist until he started squirting paint all over the place. He was very good, but I don't think you get any money for his proper paintings, only for the splash paintings.
I know. I totally, completely agree with you, but I'm really interested in the development and the evolution of the arts in our culture. And I think they've been hijacked through the world of investors.
I'm not sure that more people go to art galleries and enjoy art, the sort of art we would also appreciate, than ever before.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take the two galleries we have on the outskirts of Edinburgh, you know, the two modern ones.
Yeah.
And when they have special exhibitions over in the Dean Gallery, what was the Dean Gallery, Modern 2, they're always very well visited. And Modern 1 is consistently trying to bring in all the new art. And you don't see many people wandering around there. They'll go around the permanent collection, but when people don't like to criticize ladies, but somebody like Louise Bourgeois,
Hmm.
I can't see the point. I don't see the point of her work.
I don't,
Stuff like that. I
but I
mean,
think it's like
oh,
the emperor's new clothes, and for people
yeah,
to be able to say the emperor is naked.
yes, yes. But they take up an enormous amount of space. That was the juxtaposition I was trying to make. Over in Modern 2, there are a couple of permanent galleries downstairs, as well as the cafe and the restaurant and the loo and the shops. And then it's upstairs where you have the special exhibitions, and there may be 12, 15, 20 pictures in one room.
Hmm.
You go, and that's wonderful. And you go across the road, and there'll be enormous rooms, very good exhibition rooms, and there'll be 2 or 3 of these gigantic monstrosities
I know.
in each room, and that's it. And they
I know.
could never be displayed anywhere
Hmm.
except in the foyer of an insurance company or something like that.
I need to give you about a 7-minute warning because we've
Oh, sorry, I need to give myself a warning. I'm going to the German. I have an appointment in town at 1:30. So I mean, a real appointment, a physical appointment. So I
yeah,
have to
we've
get
got
my
another
skates
meeting
on.
starting up. I have to say this: we've got another meeting starting at 1, so I'm going to have to remember that and not and.
Can I say goodbye and thank you very, very much for a very interesting experience. And I will, Randy, try to carry on. I
Yeah,
will try.
and stay in touch with me if you want. I'll put my email address on. Giving away my age here.
Where are you?
Findhorn?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I mean, in the, where have you put your email address?
In the chat box.
No, there is nothing there yet. Is there? Self-portrait?
Just sent it.
Oh, self-portrait. I've got, oh, there we go. Can't see anything anymore.
Very nice to meet you, and have a good
You
appointment.
too,
What part of
thank
Edinburgh
you.
do you live in?
1956. Wow, getting on. I love it when people put their birth years in. Email.
Now it's a reason for apologies. That's how I
Why?
feel when I go to New York now. I always feel like I have to apologize because when I was there, I was in my 20s and 30s, and I feel like I'm saying, I'm sorry, I've got old. This wasn't supposed to happen. Because
But
New York is so youth culture.
it's the X-ray ladies wandering at being pushed around Central Park, just opposite, just by the museum. And they're pushed around, and then somebody else is pushing around the dog in another push chair. One push chair for the dog, one push chair for the dog's owner. They both look like skeletons. That really gets me about New York. It really does. And the carers are from the Philippines, doing very well. It's horrible. I hate New York. Couldn't say that.
I have to make a new coffee cup that says "I heart" with a diagonal
Yeah.
red line through it. I hate New York too, but my family's there and my daughter's there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all the best. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Nice to, as they say politely. I shall take to heart your very good advice, and I shall study it.
Thank you so much.
I just did a mouse. I don't know if you can see that. It's a mouse.
Hold it up closer. Closer.
Mouth and a bit of chin.
Uh-huh. It's
Can you
good.
see?
Look at the difference between that which shows form and that which is anecdotal.
Yeah, yeah.
Show that again, Vivian, and I'll spotlight you.
What's spotlighting mean?
It means everyone can see you big. Can you put it straight on the screen?
Is that it?
Yeah,
Is that
that's-
okay?
yes, yes. Slow and pleasurable.
With lots of lines round it, showing my age.
Thank you so much. So you look fantastic. I love looking at our lines.
You're welcome to stay in touch with me. You can treat me like your teacher. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Ruth, any final comments?
Yeah, final comment. Here we go.
Oh, that's
Wow.
gorgeous. Let me just spotlight you now.
Yeah, that's much better.
That's so beautiful.
Second eye is still doing what the first eye was doing.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Just keep remembering everything's a shape. That's not an eye, that's not a nose, it's just a shape. And it creates that sort of disassociation to be able to look at things objectively and more beautifully.
I have really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much again. Bye.
So any final comments from Randy?
Very nice. So it's really, thank you very much. And it's nice to be able to be part of your retirement party. I think you've done really great work. So
Thank you so much. Well, you were there at the very beginning. This has been a fantastic way of spending morning. I'm so glad that Ruth, and I've completely forgotten her name now, she's gone.
Vivian.
Vivian were able to be with us, so it was real. And that we'll now be able to share this with loads of other people. So
The Guardian wants it as a cover story.
thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.